series in Ephesus, 1 Corinthians 16, 8 and 9. Friends touched his skin, were carried away to the sick, and their disease. Friends touched his skin, were carried away to the sick, and their diseases left them, and the evil spirits came out of them. A handkerchief from Paul was more powerful than the demon, right? But then there are people who take it upon themselves to try to cast out demons in the name of Jesus. What do the demons say? Jesus, I know. Paul, I know. Who are you? And they leapt on them over naked and wounded. Verse 17, this became known to all the residents of Ephesus, and the name of the Lord Jesus was extolled. And now we have these believers. Like I mentioned on Sunday, the believers came confessing and divulging their practices. They were holding on to this as believers. But now they said, okay, I've got to get rid of this. And that's an example for all of us as believers. And so they had shown repentance, continued to increase and prevail mightily. Okay? Anything about that section before we move on to tonight's section? Okay. I'll get through these. So this is the theater in Ephesus, ancient theater. Some estimates that I used to see were like 50,000 seats. And some of the newer estimates that I've seen say 24,000, 25,000 seats. But regardless, we have this theater where most likely the events that we see in the end of Acts 19 take place. All right, verse 21. Now after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I've been there, what's his plan? He purposed in the Spirit, which I believe that the Spirit says you're going to go to Rome. Now, he doesn't understand all that's going to happen, but he understands he's going to go to Rome. In fact, he's writing to Rome saying, I'm planning to get to you. Okay, so he's planning to get there. Now, just as far as review, Macedonia and Achaia. Can you give me some of the cities that are in Macedonia and Achaia? And there's some of the letters from Paul that go to those cities. Macedonia and Achaia. Okay, Berea is one of them. Philippi, yeah. Thessalonica. What about Achaia? Starts with a C. Corinth. Okay. So those, just remember, maybe you could write that in your notes, because sometimes we forget those things and then you come back and you read it again and those are the cities. So you could write those down. Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, and I missed one. Philippi, thank you. Okay. Verse 22, having sent into Macedonia two of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. Okay. Verse 10, we have 2 years. We have verse 8, 3 months. So we have 3 months, 2 years, and now a while. Right? And now we get to the point in chapter 20 when Paul says, I've been there 3 years. Okay. Verse 23, about that time there arose no little disturbance concerning what? The way. All right. We'll see that term brought up again, especially in chapter 24. Who's causing the problem this time? Jews or Gentiles? Gentiles. Okay. In this situation, it's the Gentiles. For a man named Demetrius, what's his trade? Silversmith. Could be a noble trade, right? But he's making a lot of bank or a lot of money, right? Silver shrines of Artemis. He brought no little business to the craftsmen. They're making a lot of money off of people worshiping Diana or Artemis. And these he gathered together with the workmen in similar trade. And he says, men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. Any thoughts right away? What happens when we start hitting people's pocketbook? Desperate. That was exactly, yeah. This was their living. From this business, we have our wealth. Okay? So they are feeding their kids on this business. I mean, let's put it practically speaking. They're feeding their families on this business. Well, now the preaching of the gospel threatens their business, their livelihood. We have choices at this point, don't we? We could sit down and listen to what the gospel says and say, well, maybe I need to change my business. But that's not their response, is it? It brought no little business to the craftsmen. So this wasn't just something that they were barely getting by. They were making a lot of money. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. Is that a false statement? Someone said, I couldn't hear. Did someone over there? They're made with hands. Yeah, it's a true statement. Paul has persuaded people. Is that true? Yes. Almost all of Asia. You go back up to verse 10. All the residents of Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jews and Greeks. Okay? This Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. That's a message he made to the people in Athens in Acts 17. It's the message that he made in Acts 14 when he was in Lystra and they tried to kill him. It's a message that preached everywhere. In fact, I think Mark 1:1 is a very political statement. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Okay, that excludes anyone else. Okay? And so they're putting two and two together. Okay, that these gods made with hands are not gods, but I'm making money based on people valuing this silver more than silver. They're not valuing it based on the silver. They're valuing it based on the worship and the spiritual value of it. And so they really are making a lot of money on this. Okay, so verse 27, and there is danger not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, that she may even be deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship. Any thoughts about that? Over here with Greg. You know, it makes me think of Gideon and his father, when Gideon had to destroy his father's idols, and everybody wants Gideon's father to do something about it, and Gideon's father is like, well, let Baal fight for himself.
Yeah, it's interesting that he plays on the feelings of the people that, hey, look, this goddess Artemis, she's going to become as nothing here. But really, that wasn't his motive. His motive was concerned about how it was affecting him. And so now he has to play on the emotions of others and bring in these other things. And sometimes we're guilty of that.
Yes,
right?
we are.
We're guilty of playing on the emotions or of certain situations to try to maybe in a roundabout way get what we think we want or what we want. It's just interesting here how that unfolds, and you see it very plainly.
Yeah, absolutely. You can, the motive came out first, right? I mean, he just came out first and foremost with what his motive was, but now he's trying to be, manipulative. I hate to even say persuasive, because this is really manipulation. He's trying to get people stirred up and poison their minds, like we've been watching in the rest of the book of Acts already. Over there with Mary.
Demetrius sounds like the union boss who's getting all the gang together and letting them know that now not only will we not have our profession, but it will be the end of the world.
I grew up in a union household, and I know exactly what you're talking about. That's exactly right. There's a place sometimes for him, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of corruption in those union bosses. No one shoot me. There's no union bosses here, right? Okay. But that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. When they heard this, people are saying things behind the scenes to the wrong people, and then there's an uprising at work. And then there's an uprising at work. Some of you may have gone through things like that. It's just something for us as we're reading the Bible to not just say, okay, this is talking about Ephesus first century. How does this happen today, right? So let's be thinking about, how do I apply this in my own life, recognizing that our words, a hot-tempered man, that we just heard this in Proverbs this morning, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife. It was to listen to the Proverbs. When they heard this, they were enraged and were crying out, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." This is no longer about defending money. This is about defending Diana. As Greg said, he took this to a whole other level because he knew he could get the crowd really stirred up on that. Same tactics happen today. So, what's the result of manipulation and stirring up people? What's the first phrase of the next verse? The city was filled with confusion. City was filled with confusion. They rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. They're dragging people into the theater, but remember, it's confusion. So what's that tell you? Do they even know what's going on? But in this mob of people, they're already grabbing someone, dragging them in. They don't even know what's going on. Okay. They rush together into the theater. And Christians, we don't rush together in any kind of group like that. Dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. Paul wished to go in among the crowd. The disciples would not let him. Why? They probably would have killed him. No. You can't, you can't stop a mob mentality. We're going to find that out, especially in chapter 21 and 22. You can't stop this mob mentality. In the disciples, we see this repeatedly. They're trying to protect Paul. Chapter 9, they put him down in a basket and get him out of Damascus. Other times later, they're trying to stop him from going to Jerusalem. They're trying to protect him. Paul, you keep getting your teeth kicked in. Come on, man. So they're trying to protect him, okay? Even some of the Asiarchs who were friends of his sent to him, urging him not to venture into the theater. Verse 32. Another description of the confusion by Luke. Now some cried out one thing and some another, for the assembly. Now that's the word ecclesia, where we get church. Okay? When you see it the rest of the New Testament, that word is translated church or congregation. But here it's an assembly. That's really what the word means. The called out. The assembly was in confusion. Most of them did not know why they had come together. And again, will anything good happen in a group like that? Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward. And Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. What's the but? Usually we see the but in connection to the Jews. Now it's flipped here. What's the but here? When they recognized he was a Jew, how they respond? Oh, let's listen to him. Let's hear his side. Yeah, that happens a lot today too, doesn't it? They recognized that he was a Jew. For about 2 hours, they all cried out with one voice, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." They don't know why they're there, but they're all crying out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." They're all shouting that same phrase. They don't know why they're there, but it's in confusion. And I want to make a point about verse 34 because I want you to notice Acts chapter 22. Because the Jewish people did the same thing. Acts 22. In Acts 19, you have a group of Gentiles. When they hear a Jewish man is trying to speak to them, they completely shut down and they won't listen. You flip it in Acts 22. Paul is talking to the Jewish crowd and he says Jesus, the Messiah, their Messiah, had sent him to the Gentiles. How did they take that? Acts 22 in verse 21. And he said to me, go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. What's this first phrase in verse 22 say? They listened for a while. Any other versions? Up to this word. I love how the English Standard says it. Have you ever done that in a marriage or a family, or you listen to a word and then your brain shuts off? No one's ever done that here, right? We all do that sometimes, don't we? I'm making the point here that we have Jewish people. They hear the word Gentile and they completely shut down and they won't listen anymore. The Gentiles hear that a Jewish person wants to talk to them and they shut down and they won't listen. Now, as I said, we have got to apply that to today because we live in a very charged, polarized world, don't we? And as God's people, we can't be the kind of person who shuts down and won't listen to others. Amen? We can't be. We must not be like this. This is mob mentality. This is how people get killed. And this is how no truth comes of it. All right, Greg?
Yeah, I just think, too, that verse where it says, 32, and most of them did not even know why they had come together. I mean, think about this. You've got this mob mentality going on, and half of them are causing a riot, and they don't even know why. They're just following the crowd.
Yep.
And that is a dangerous place that we can be sometimes. Is we hear one thing or another, and we follow the mob mentality on certain things, and we never stop to ask why and to think for ourselves. Look, a lot of people do that in religion, right?
Yep.
Not rioting, but following mob mentality rather than stopping to think for themselves. I think that's one point. The other point that's really interesting here is that how often you say, well, you know what, with Paul, with anyone, if you're going to die, if you're going to be killed for teaching Jesus, well, that's just the way it is. You can't ever back down. Well, Paul here, this wasn't his hill to die on.
Amen.
These people weren't interested in listening. They didn't even know why they were there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the right time for him to go rushing in to try to teach. He would say that there would be plenty of other times where he would put himself in harm's way, as we already know.
Yeah.
But this wasn't one of those days.
Yeah.
And there are times like that.
That's right. A good point. And then even earlier in the chapter, remember verse 9, going along with what Greg said, when some became stubborn and continued in unbelief, speaking evil of the way before the congregation, he withdrew from them. He didn't just stay there all the time and get his face kicked in. There were times when he says, we're moving on. Now, again, that's a decision that sometimes we have to, we have to struggle with. But the principle is there that Paul didn't always just jump in every fight, or as Greg said, die on every hill. Sometimes we need to live to fight another day. That wasn't cowardice on his part. We understand that. That was wisdom, not cowardice. Okay? Any other comments? They gave him audience. Okay. All right. So in verse 34, when they recognized that he was a Jew, sorry. Yeah, Mary, go ahead.
I don't mean to step back from where we're going, but I'd like to bring something to our recall when COVID was going on about the mob mentality thing. To this day, I don't know why I was lining up to get paper towel and toilet paper like we were doing, because I just knew somebody somewhere knew something that I didn't. And even though the question was being asked, and I didn't see any of you all in here, so I'm the only one guilty, so y'all, don't worry about that. I didn't see any of you all. I was the one out there.
Oh,
but anyway.
we all got toilet paper in our house.
Anyway, so that's a little more bringing it home as to what mob mentality can be like.
Yeah, even this port workers strike that happened, right? What happened? Yeah. Because of COVID, man, we went for the toilet paper, which is made in America. Sorry, anyway. Yeah. Someone else up here with Yvonne. But it is groupthink, and we have to stop and get out of that. And tell you, that's really hard, by the way, when you have there's sometimes that happens in families. You have a very domineering family, and you have to have someone to step back and say, whoa, hold on a minute. The way we're all acting is wrong.
In reading and studying, you realize that those who were in certain positions, they were very focused on what they needed to do and wouldn't let anything else distract them. For instance, he knew he had to go to Rome. Mm-hmm. He knew there were certain things he needed to accomplish. So that probably was part of the reason he listened to the others, to letting them, because he knew what could happen. But he also wanted to make sure that he stayed on point.
Good point, because he doesn't listen to him when they try to get him to stop from going to Jerusalem, right? He's like, what do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? I got to go to Jerusalem, right? But in this situation, he's staying on his mission where he knows he's going. Yeah, it's good. Yep.
Kind of tack on to your statement earlier about the non-cowardice of Paul. It also technically wasn't in his control either, because he was almost dead set of going into that theater, but his friends said they were sensitive and they were urging. It was like, hey, dude, do not do this. I had this image in my mind, but they were just physically holding him back. So,
it could be.
Like, dude, no.
Don't. Yeah, it could be that they just all form a blockade, and you say, you're not going, Paul. Intervention.
Just pushing them back.
Yeah. Okay. Someone else? All right. When the town clerk, verse 35, had quieted the crowd, he said, Men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is temple keeper of the great Artemis and of the sacred stone that fell from the sky? Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemous of our goddess. If therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. Again, there's that word ecclesia that's typically translated church. Okay, does anybody want to summarize that? What's the reasoning of the town clerk here, which is fairly reasonable, right? Over here with Lynette. Sorry, Lynette.
He seems to be the only one that's keeping his head, keeping his calm. Mm-hmm. And he's able to think, like you're saying, and let them know that we're going to get in trouble, or all of y'all are going to get in trouble if we don't stop what we're doing, because there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
And that was one thing, this is more of a question. The Roman Empire, they didn't like any kind of uprisings or riots or anything. Mm-hmm. So they would have, it wasn't a false thing he was saying. It was very accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you think about his argument, verse 37, what crime have they committed? You don't like what they teach, but they haven't robbed temples. They're not blaspheming our goddess. You might disagree with what they're saying, but they're not breaking any laws. And if you think they've broken any laws, verse 38, what's your obligation? There's courts down the street. Go to court. Plead the case. Okay? It shall be settled in the regular, and if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly, for we're in charge. Again, we're in danger. Again, they didn't put up with, the Romans didn't put up with that kind of stuff. Okay. Any final thoughts about Acts 19? So there's a thought that I have. How can we be the town clerk in our relationships today or at work? Because I think we need to be like the town clerk, as Lynette said, having the cooler head. What does that look like? You know, I want to talk about that. Sorry, did you have something different?
Well, you can finish your thought if you want.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking too about the fact that they say, what complaint do you have? They weren't sacrilegious. They weren't blaspheming our goddess. You think their message stood on its own. They didn't have to go on the offensive against this or that. They just had to go in and preach the truth. And people were drawing the right conclusions just by hearing the truth being taught. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't appear that they ever, it seems like maybe they never used the name of Artemis or Diana specifically. They just spoke in general truths. Mm-hmm. You know, gods made with hands aren't gods. Well, that wasn't against any particular. And I just think there is a lesson for us there too, that sometimes when we go in with guns blazing and we say certain, you know, we start calling names here and there, we can shut people down.
Yeah, that's
just
right.
Preach the truth. Let the gospel stand on its own.
It's a great point.
It's got the power.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly it had the power because they knew what was being said. Yeah. Okay, over here with Lynn. I want to be thinking about that, meditating on this. How do we look like the town clerk in relationships or at work or at the church? Because we need to have those cooler heads when everyone else is losing theirs.
And the reason why what Greg just said is so important is because you never know who's listening. We have people in this world that's lost and they're seeking God, but they're fearful of Christians that's hypocrites. So the way we respond to chaos, we need to be very careful with that because we never know who's listening and watching.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah. Cassandra?
I was just thinking that to answer some of your question, we have to think, what is the ultimate goal?
Yeah.
What are we here for? What are we trying to? Are we the one in the crowd trying to be the one that's seen, or do you want to be the one that's being heard? You know, you have to be very careful of that and remember what our ultimate goal is. And I piggyback on what Greg said. The gospel is going to speak for itself. All we have to do is just be the cooler head and deliver it. We're not trying to do nothing extraordinary or put our own, emphasis on it. Just preach the word. And so, like you said, we have to be the one there with the cooler head.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts about that? Because I had one more other thought. It's a kind of a different thought. Yeah, Brother Lester.
You know, brother, every time I study these passages talking about this great city of Ephesus and the goddess Diana and all what they would call their magnificence, I think about the trip that Fritz and I and Max made to Vestavia, where we saw this big old statue. In fact, Fritz and I was at the right place because the person we stayed with took us on a tour of the city. And I remember Brother Homer saying, you see that? You can barely see it as someone pointing in the sky. And said, we're going over there to see that. And as we got closer and closer, I was like, what in the world is this? And it was a big old statue of a steel god by the name of Vulcan. And as we got closer and I saw it, and I'm like, you mean to tell me my father's hometown, Montgomery, Alabama, Union Spring, Alabama, is a pagan city? And I just couldn't help but feel sad. They call it the Bible Belt, and it's all different types of names of church buildings and just on this belt. And I'm like, wow. So when I think about what's going on in Ephesus, it brings my attention to Alabama, to see that big statue and them having these stores where they sold those statues and what.
The little mini statues, yeah. Well, one of the things that I want to think about, we've got about 3 minutes or so left. Does someone have? Okay. Something you said, Cassandra, the idea of being seen, being heard. Here, they were apparently only interested in being heard. And that's what happens in our relationships. And we all know it. We want to be heard, we want to be seen, but sometimes we're not listening and we're not seeing others. Right? And so that's important for us in our relationships, because that's how chaos starts. When I just want to be heard and I just want to be seen, but I'm not hearing you and I'm not seeing you. And I think that that's where the cooler heads have to be able to stand up and say, we need to hear each other and see each other. That being said, the final question is, how does it get from on fire Ephesus, standing against false doctrine, standing against persecution, preaching the word, faithful, to losing your first love? Anybody want to take a crack at that in our last minute or so? How does that happen from on fire to no first love? What happens along the way? Here, yeah. I want to hear that. I know. Got to use the mic.
Well, I think what it was, they were all together and they were rushing to do this, and then all of a sudden there was confusion.
Yeah.
So people started to dropping off and listening to what Paul was saying.
Yeah.
And now everything that they had geared toward Diana was getting all messed up.
Yeah. Good point. So how does it go from on fire for Jesus to I've left my first love? We probably ought to have a whole class just on that.
I think it's a lot of, you forget what you started off being and following.
Because remember, Jesus told them, remember
Yes.
what happened at the first.
And you think about Stephen and so many other places in the Bible, there's always a history of what happened. What happened? What did I do for you? What did God do for you? Remember that. Keep that in mind so you can make the right decisions going forward. Yeah.
I'll just give you one thought is, we forget what it was like when we were first Christians, but you remember Peter said in 2 Peter, I am stirring up your pure minds by what? Way of remembrance. We forget. We can never stop stirring up our minds with remembering. And that's just not here at the church building. That's all the time. Okay, we got to quit. But Acts 20 on Sunday. And we will cover all of Acts 20 on Sunday. Okay? God bless you.
Good evening. Our first song tonight will be "The Lord is My Light." The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And He is my strength, the defense of my life. Whom shall I fear? Have mercy, O Lord, and answer my cry. Turn not away, for Thou art my help, the God of salvation. Turn not away. Wait, await on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Wait on the Lord. Wait, await on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Yes, wait on the Lord. O Lord, lead me now in Thy path straight and even. Teach me Thy way. I will not despair. Thy goodness sustains me. Teach me Thy way. To dwell in this house all the days of my life. This shall I see, and oh, to behold the Lord in His beauty. This shall I see. Wait, await on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Wait on the Lord. Wait, await on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Yes, wait on the Lord.
Good evening. Life is full of moments we plan and cherish, but sometimes it reminds us how fragile and fleeting life truly is. Tonight, I want to tell you about my friend, Clay. He's in the red shirt on the slide behind me. In 2019, we became friends during Vacation Bible School at Campbell Road in Dallas. We spent the week together riding to church, enjoying activities, and we made plans for the next year. We could not wait to meet up at Dry Creek and spend even more time together. But 6 months later, on February 8th, 2020, my mom received a call that Clay had unexpectedly passed away, just a few days after his 11th birthday. At 10 years old, I did not understand how this could happen. In James 4, verses 13 and 14, it says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a while and then vanishes away." This passage reminds us that while we may make plans, our lives are fragile and uncertain. Only God knows what tomorrow holds. James describes life as a vapor, something that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Clay's passing taught me how true this is. The plans Clay and I had made that summer seemed so solid, but life reminded me how fleeting it can be. Psalms chapter 90, verse 12 reads, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Clay's life, though short, teaches us, or continues to remind me to prioritize what truly matters, serving God and the importance of living intentionally for Him each and every day. C.T. Studd once wrote, "Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." These words should challenge us to live for what truly matters and to focus for living for Christ. If you have been waiting to submit your life to Christ in baptism and become a child of God, or if you are already a Christian and you need prayers to get back on the right path, I encourage you to take that step tonight. Life is too short to delay. You have the opportunity to come now as we stand and as we sing.